Everybody, and welcome to the highlight of civilization. And this day, it's going to get even better. Wow, what a live stream I have planned for you. Will I get double canceled, triple canceled? I don't know. We'll see. And if you'd like to enjoy this at the maximum potential, all you need is a mug or a glass, like a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called a simultaneous sip, and it happens now. Go. Double canceled. Could happen. So, let's get right to the news. Have I ever told you about the persuasion concept called embrace and amplify? Where if somebody's doing something that's like a little nutty, but you can't talk them out of it, instead of talking out of it, you embrace it and go with it until it looks so ridiculous that the person will talk themselves out of it. And sometimes I look at things in the wild, and I say to myself, is somebody trying to do that, or are they serious? Because you can't tell the difference between somebody who's playing a prank and trying to extend a bad idea until it makes it look extra bad, or if they're really buying into it. I give you the following story. This is a real story. I am not making this up. That Jill Biden and I guess Secretary of State Blinken, they gave an award for it was the International Women of Courage Award. And so the winner of the International Women of Courage Award is a biological male from Argentina who has transitioned. Now, is the Biden administration serious about that? Did they really do that? Really? Now, I remind you that I'm a big supporter of the trans community. The adults can do anything they want. That's the beauty of America, right? If you're an adult, it's your body, I'm good with whatever you need to do. So I'm a big supporter in that sense. But I'm wondering if this is suggesting that we need new vocabulary for things. I feel like the problem is that we only have this one word, women or woman. And I think, well, if you only have one word, but everybody's fighting to be the only one who's in it. It's like, the biological women are like, no, we're the women. And then the trans women might be, no, we're women also. But then people are like, oh, the word needs to be changed a little bit because it's not, accurate, some say. Well, I think we could fix this by just fixing our words. So instead of fixing the world, let me do what people on social media do. Oh no, I'm not going to change anything in the world. I'm going to change the words, because once the words are changed, everything will be good. That's how we think. And so I thought, why not take the word woman, which is W-O-M-A-N, and we'll use that for people who are born biologically male, but they transitioned, so they would be woman, and they get their own word. But the people who used to be called women, kind of the classic, old school, old-fashioned women, they were like born that way and just stayed that way, kind of boring, old-fashioned. Well, the boring and old-fashioned women, born with vaginas and stuff, here's my new word, woman, W-O-M-B-A-N. So you could either be a woman, suggesting that you have a womb, which says nothing about your, say, gender preference. It's not really a gender thing. It's just, I got a womb. I got a womb, I'm a woman. But if you wanted to just keep the old name, the people who transitioned, they could have the name woman or woman. And the others would be womans and woman. It's a good idea. Now, is that a good idea? Or have I embraced and amplified? Have I taken something that was already a little bit ridiculous and just made it more ridiculous? Yes, I did. So am I serious? No. No, I'm not serious. It's just funny. And by the way, I will not back off from the point that you can treat people with complete respect, the trans community. You should always treat them with respect like everybody else. But sometimes the situation is funny, right? The way you play with words and the political part of it, that part's funny. But it's not funny to discriminate. And it's not funny to be trans. People are people. Everybody's got to be an individual. But it's an interesting situation is what I'm going to say. In Real Clear Politics, there was an article by Larry Elder who did what I call a very accurate job of describing my situation. I'm not going to call it supportive or not supportive. Rather, it was just an accurate description of what happened. And it stood out because it was in the news. Do you know how rare it is for me to read a news story that involves me and there's nothing in there that's wrong? Like there's no misstatement or there's no mind reading, you know. I mean, I think he said I was frustrated, but you don't have to read my mind to know that. Yeah, that's sort of obvious. So just so you know, it's out there. I got a big reaction for one of my Robots Read News comics. That's my little non-Dilbert comic that I do mostly for the locals subscribers, but sometimes I share. And they like this one so much, they asked me to share it. So if you haven't seen it, it's the picture is the same every time. It's just a robot reading the news, just sitting at a desk. And the robot says in the first panel, the so-called QAnon shaman has reached a deal with federal prosecutors. The star of the bloody January 6th insurrection has agreed to overthrow Putin in return for his freedom. Sources say he will accomplish the coup using a combination of selfie-taking and fashionable sauntering. So, people like that one. All right. So Jenna Ellis has reached some kind of an agreement with a Colorado judge for what's called a public censure. Public censure. And they claim that there were at least 10 statements she made about the 2020 election that were misrepresentations. And I guess she must have agreed to the following characterization of her actions. Quote, she had a reckless state of mind, and I guess she had to sign that she agreed with that, because of a, quote, selfish motive, which apparently she had to sign that she had. Now, am I wrong, or is she being censured by mind readers because they determined that they could tell her state of mind and why she was acting, and then they made her sign an agreement that her own interpretation of her state of mind was wrong, and the mind reader's interpretation of her state of mind was right? Probably to avoid even bigger legal, problems. Did they just blackmail her into agreeing with mind readers over her own thoughts? I think so. Am I wrong? It was literally a thought crime. Because here's the more common explanation of why she did what she did. Can we just remove for selfish purposes? Who in the world acts in a way that's not for selfish purposes? I mean, even if you're helping somebody, it's because you want to feel that way, right? That's something you want too. You want that person to feel better. So everything is a selfish motive. So let's forget the selfish motives kind. She had to agree to reckless state of mind. What the hell is a reckless state of mind? What if you just believe what you're saying? What if you just believe what you're saying? One of the examples was hyperbole. She actually had to admit that her hyperbole was not technically accurate. Here was the hyperbole, that Hillary Clinton still hasn't accepted the election that she lost. Is that a state of a reckless state of mind? Or is it just an obvious hyperbole based on the fact that Hillary Clinton still says that Russians stole the election still. Now, if you ask me, I would say that's Hillary Clinton not accepting the election, except in a technical sense. Yeah, in a technical sense, she accepted it. In a rhetorical sense, she still says Trump stole it. So if Jenna Ellis says that Hillary Clinton's still not, accepting the election or whatever the wording was, and she had to admit she had a reckless state of mind and she said it for selfish reasons. What? I feel like this is a whole new level. I've been sort of afraid for a long time that we'd start punishing people for their internal thoughts because we can see their thoughts better than they can explain their own thoughts. Now, does that sound like something that happened to me? If you look at, my drama, the entire interpretation of my situation is based on what I was thinking. It's not based on what I said. It is not based on what I said. It is entirely based on what people who don't know me think I was thinking. You know that's true. It was based on my internal thoughts, which are opposite from what I've expressed and opposite from what I think. But external people have decided that they have a better idea what I was thinking, what my intentions were. And then they punished me by cancellation. Now, I'm not complaining, I'm just describing. And there's a reason that I say that. When anybody thinks I'm complaining about my situation, that's mind reading. If I describe it, that's the only thing you know. The only thing you know is I described it. Internally, I'm not having a problem with it at all. Not even a little bit. But everybody's like, stop complaining. Why are you complaining? Why'd you do this for the wrong reason? It's entirely mind reading. We've got to the point where Jenna Ellis and me are both being punished for some fucking idiot's mind-reading opinion of what's happening in our heads. This is really happening today. This is today. Today, people are being punished for mind-reading because somebody is a mind reader. Literally fucking happened today, right? And I got to say that watching it happen to Jenna Ellis is worse than watching it happen to me. Because like I say, I'm not stuck in the past. I'm already past it. I'm way past it. I'm just having fun organizing what's next. But watching it happen to somebody else in my country, this is fucking America, people. You don't punish people because you're a mind reader. We got to stop doing that, right? Got to stop doing that. All right. Yeah, we'll go easy on you if you sign a document that says we read your mind correctly. That's basically what happened to Jenna Ellis. She basically had to sign a document that other people knew what was in her mind better than she did. That actually fucking happened. I'm really pissed off about this. And by the way, it's not my job to defend Jenna Ellis for anything she's done or thought. That's not my job. I'm just saying, this is really wrong. In a serious, serious way, this is wrong. Wow. Well, speaking about what's right, the cable news ratings came out, and as you know, Tucker Carlson's been showing the January 6th stuff, a lot of interest in that. And apparently he just destroyed the ratings of all the competing networks. I think he got more ratings than all of them put together, I believe. That was the reporting. All of them put together were less than he got. Less than Fox got, but I think he was the driver of that. All right, do you remember I'm always making fun of Carl Bernstein for having a role as the worse than Watergate guy? That's right. All right, we're losing the narrative. We got to bring somebody out to say it was worse than Watergate. Who we got? Carl. You'll say anything. Come out here. Trump. It's worse than Watergate. Worse than Watergate. Ah. All right. Carl, you're done. It's worse than Watergate. It's worse than what? Okay, we got it. Yeah, it's worse than what? Stop it, Carl. Stop it. We're just going to put you on ice until we're losing the narrative again, and we'll drag you out. It's worse than Watergate. Stop it. Just stop it. But now they've got a new one. Now, let me first say That is someone whose service to the country I appreciate, and I also have real empathy for the fact he got injured. But one of the, I don't know how many were injured, but one of the injured, I think he's Capitol Police, Michael Fanone. You've seen him. He now worked for CNN, and he has a book out about his situation on January 6th and his injury, etc. So he writes he needs to write an opinion piece, which he wrote, for CNN to counter the Tucker Carlson narrative. And his narrative is, yes, there was violence, nobody's questioning that, but that the larger characterization of the event should have been more a protest than violent insurrection. But nobody is doubting that there was violence. So here's what he writes in his opinion piece. He talked also about some texts and emails that had been found from Fox News. He says, "I didn't need to read the reports of his texts to know that Carlson's spin about January 6th is fabricated. I was there. I saw it. I lived it. I fought alongside my brother and sister officers to defend the Capitol. We have scars and injuries to prove it." All right. Which part of Carlson's spin or narrative did he debunk with his facts? Is there anything that he debunked with his facts and his knowledge? No, because Tucker Carlson says, yes, there was violence. All of that happened. It's documented. And so this guy says, there was violence there. I was in it. And it was documented. It's real. So he just agreed with Tucker Carlson, added nothing to the story, added nothing, and declared the narrative was wrong. That's all he had. All he had was, yeah, the part, that violence that you agree happened, I was in it. So therefore you're wrong. No, therefore he's right. Because he said there were violent things, which we all condemn. And then the new worse than Watergate guy is saying there was violence, which we all agree to. But because the thing we all agree to, he was part of, we should reject the larger story because the part we agree to, we agree. That's what CNN had today. That was their best push. They hired a guy just to be the new. Now let me ask, if they didn't need him just to remind you that there was violence, do you think he'd be working at CNN? Do you think that his penetrating analysis of I was there, I saw it, I lived it, was that the penetrating opinion that CNN's looking for? No, he was hired purely as propaganda. He's literally the propaganda guy. He doesn't have anything to say except he was injured, which, let me say again, I have great empathy for anybody who's injured. And he was doing his job and probably doing it as well as it could be done. So I respect him totally for the work he did and the injury he took on behalf of the Capitol. I appreciate that. As an American, I appreciate him. But this is just bullshit. Am I wrong? This is just bullshit. Hiring this guy to be the next worse than Watergate guy. All right. There's a video that's, I guess we're going to call it re-emerging. Do you remember around January 6th, there were these videos you probably saw that purport to show Antifa changing their clothes at the event, taking off their all black outfits that they used. And then there's video of people who appear to be Antifa in all black breaking through at least some window or trying to. Now, I wouldn't get too carried away with that narrative. Because like the violence, which was, fortunately, not many people were involved with, as horrible it wasn't most people involved. But I suspect that the Antifa thing is both real and not the biggest story. Because I don't think it happened, I don't think much happened only because of Antifa. But I do think that they were there, and I do think that they they might have been making it worse. I do think the FBI was there. I don't know if they made it worse. So there's a whole bunch of bad actors there, but they're not all right-leaning actors. It's just that I don't know how much weight to put on the Antifa thing. It looks like it's real, but it might have been, a dozen people. It's hard to say. So I don't know what weight to put on that. All right, but as we're watching all, one conspiracy theory after another being debunked these days, I like to go back to Charlottesville Fine People March 2018, I think it was, and ask you this question. Given everything you know about the world in the last few years, just what we've learned about hoaxes and how the hoaxes are actually organized. They're not just things that people believe, they're organized hoaxes. Now, what do you think of this? What are the odds that the Tiki Torch carrying neo-Nazis from Charlottesville would have one rally of that type? Just once ever. Now, it is true that it's been documented that members of that march have been in other racist marches. Now, I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that some number of the marchers were real racists who do racist stuff. But do you know the Patriot Front group that tries to be, they march around in with their flags and their khakis on? They all look alike. Yeah. Have you noticed that they didn't have one rally? They didn't have one. They sort of keep doing it. Have you noticed that the Klan, when they put on their funny outfits and stuff, there aren't many of them. Fortunately, it's a pretty small number of people. But did they stop doing events? I don't think they did. They kind of keep doing them. So was this the only organized, and maybe the biggest one, maybe the biggest organized group of self-confessed racists? Does it seem a little bit unusual to you that was a one-off event when nothing is ever a one-off event? Now, some said, they found out it was a bad idea. Did that ever stop anybody? Do you remember when Antifa found out it was a bad idea because some people got hurt, and then they immediately stopped and never had? No, that doesn't happen. If people get attention, they do more of it. It doesn't matter what else happened. If people get attention, they do more of it because it's an attention-getting kind of thing. So if somebody gets hurt and there's even more attention, I'm not even sure that would slow them down. So while I wouldn't reject the possibility that a lot of the members thought the heat was too much, so they just decided not to be part of it, that's possible. But by today's standards, it seems, in my opinion, almost certainly a Democrat op. Almost certainly. To me, it just looks like the Democrats were trying to take Trump out by creating a situation that showed that the country had become more racist because of Trump. So it was always used as the signal that Trump is bad for sure. So as before it was like, he says things that are, there's maybe an invisible whistle, but there's nothing visual. It's sort of a concept. It's about the way he talks. He talks in a way, but not really. If you looked at technically what he says, it's not racist, but it's making us think maybe he's racist in his mind. And they couldn't sell you what was in his mind until they made it visual. It scared the shit out of you. And then it became Biden's, his entire brand. We don't want to have more of that stuff. The veins were bulging through their necks. Right? My current assumption is that it was a Democrat operation. It may have been run through some shady group that hired real racists. Now, and again, no question they were real racists. I don't know what percentage were, but no question we're talking about real racists, not a fake organization. It's just that the organization of it, the crispness with which they acted, the clean little tiki torches. Do you think there would never again be a tiki torch march by those same people after that? None of that makes sense. Now, I'm not going to say they're actors. Right? I'm not going to say they're actors. I don't have any evidence of that. I just think they would not have been organized unless it had been an op. It looks staged, yeah. So that's my current opinion, even though the racists are real ones who have been in other events. that doesn't change the narrative. All right. So in Virginia, as you know, Governor Youngkin won maybe in no small part because he wanted to get rid of critical race theory in schools, which was popular enough, and he was a good enough politician, that he got elected. But now there are reports that the Virginia Teachers Union is providing these toolkits, teaching guides, etc., that are just a sneaky way to put the CRT back in, even though it's not allowed. So the toolkit promotes 13 guiding principles of the Black Lives Matter movement. So these include, now I don't have them all, but I'm just taking this from a report on Fox News. So here are some of the guiding principles. Working towards a queer-affirming network where heteronormative thinking no longer exists. Remember, this is written for kids. Right? So kids will be learning that, well, when I say kids, I'm talking about just the high-end language being used. I suppose they're talking to the teachers when they're saying this, but working towards a queer-affirming network where heteronormative thinking no longer exists. I feel like the old way we said that was treat individuals with dignity. It's a free country. Don't discriminate. It feels like there were simple words to say it. It's a big tell when you have to use you have to basically dump the dictionary on it. If you're dumping the dictionary on the thing you're trying to say, that's a red flag, right? Because things that you believe that are good and are real, you say in direct language. Oh, do not discriminate against the LGBT community, right? Just direct. Instead of, I'll give you some more of this weird language. Here's another one. It talks about the disruption of Western nuclear family dynamics and a return to the collective village. And let's see, my favorite one is coming up. We are committed to being self-reflexive and doing the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift black trans folk, especially black trans women, who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonistic violence. Now, who is that language written for? Sixth graders? I guess it's for the teachers, but couldn't they give teachers some language that the teachers could then use? Like, why are you dumping the dictionary on this? Dumping the dictionary looks like you're trying to hide your intention, honestly. And lessons plans encourage students to think about how they can get involved in the Black Lives Movement and other causes. A tip sheet for hosting a virtual event, how to organize, build activists for future engagements. But here's the best part. This is a research question for sixth graders. This is actually part of the toolkit. I'm not making this up, according to Fox News, right? It wasn't there. So I'm just taking the news report as true. To be honest, it doesn't sound true. If I should take a moment. It was in the Wall Street Journal too. But it sounds so ridiculous that it couldn't be true. But here it is. A research question for sixth graders is, quote, how will you liberate yourself and your oppressors? I think that's real. How will you liberate yourself and your oppressors? And by the way, who are the oppressors? Let's see, who's mentioned? They talk a little bit about black trans women. I wonder do they mean the black trans women are the oppressors? Who could they be referring to? Who else do they refer? They talk about, let's say, Black Lives Matter, but I don't think they think the people in Black Lives Matter are oppressors. Who could they be referring to as these oppressors? I don't know. It's still a mystery. I guess I'll have to do some research myself. Now, wouldn't it be cool if this story fit perfectly with the next thing I'm going to talk about? Wouldn't that be cool? Next thing I'm going to talk about is that there's an epidemic of depression in young people, especially young women. And Jonathan Haidt has a good Substack on this, and he's talking about a observation by Greg Lukianoff, who noticed that in psychology, there's a thing called cognitive behavioral training. So it's a set of tools to train somebody to have better mental health. And I believe it works. Would you agree? Called CBT. Now, if you spend enough time on the internet, you might think CBT means something different, not cognitive behavioral therapy. Same as you don't realize that BBC is the British Broadcasting. So you may have some confusion about the CBT, but what it means in this context is cognitive behavioral therapy. And most of you would agree with the statement, if you've heard of it or you've used it, that it's a real useful tool. It's basically telling you how to reframe your mind to avoid depression. You know, I talk about reframing all the time. If you see, and one of the key parts of that is teaching you to avoid catastrophizing, meaning avoid thinking that the world is going to be destroyed and every little problem is going to kill you. You know, avoid thinking that climate change is going to kill you personally. Avoid thinking that this or that is off the rails and it's the end of the world. Avoid thinking that, you know, that. So that's part of CBT, is to avoid thinking it's the end of the world. Another is to avoid thinking that you're just a victim of things happening, but rather to reframe it as you have control over your life. Yes, everybody has good luck and bad luck, but you basically are the agent of your own life. And if you do that, apparently your mental health is much better. So, at about the time that young people started learning that they were victims in a world in which many catastrophes are happening or about to happen, they got mental illness, and the mental illness line just went shh. And the hypothesis is that the way kids are being taught, victims and victimology and, you know, the world is going to hell and climate change is going to fry you, creates, not only does it create mental depression, bad mental health, not only does it create it, but it's literally opposite of good technique, cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, let's bring this all back to something real. One of the biggest questions that I've been getting since I got canceled is, Scott, how you doing? How you doing? Are you okay? Like almost everybody came to me and said, are you going to make it through this? You know, how's your mental state? Are you okay mentally? The entire time that people were asking me that, I kept thinking to myself, what are you talking about? I'm in complete control of this. I don't even know why you're worried about me. There was never a single point where I said to myself, oh, I'm a victim of things. I've described it. I've described what happened. But not once did I think I wasn't in control of it. I did the thing that caused it. I will now do the things that move me to some new place that I'll be happy with. And that it's all me doing stuff. That's my only view of the world. Now, is that an accurate worldview? Is that accurate? Not exactly. But reframes don't need to be accurate. Reframes do not care about what's true. They only need to work. That's a big theme of my now canceled book, which you'll see eventually. So you don't have to say to yourself, oh, it's a little bit true that I do some things, but it's also true that other people do things. So I'm trying to, understand it in its complexity. No, don't do that. Do not understand its complexity. You're in charge. Go do what you need to do. So you can't get two better examples of the fact that if you train people to have mental illness, they will. If you train people to reframe their condition as they're in charge, they will avoid some of that. I also don't worry about the catastrophes, for the most part. There was one that scared me, the supply chain problem during the pandemic. The supply chain problem scared me. I have to admit that one got me. But that was real. You know what I mean? That was real, and it was pretty short term, and it could have gone the other way. I still bet on the Adams law of slow-moving disasters, which we'd have just enough time to compensate and work through it, and we did. So the prediction was better than the way I felt about it. So I predicted correctly. I was pretty scared. I got to admit, that's the only thing I can think of in like the global disaster situations of my entire life. Although I think when I was 10 years old, I was afraid of a nuke from Russia. But between then, not too much. So, what do you think of the hypothesis? That teaching kids that they're victims, and basically their life depends primarily on what other people are thinking of them and doing, that is guaranteed to give you mental illness. I don't have to be a psychologist to know that. That's just obvious. It's obvious. So now bring it all together. Do you remember my bigger play when I was offending everybody with my hyperbole? It was to draw attention so that I could reframe the dominant view, especially in the black world and people who are allies of the black world, which is that looking backwards at who victimized you is not a good strategy. It's just not. But I was taking it from the point of view of not a good strategy for success, meaning it doesn't get you in the right place. It is also a way to make you mentally ill. I'm convinced of that it doesn't just make you less successful because it cuts you off from the statistically best ways to operate, but it actually makes you mentally weak. Now, have you noticed that events in the world are slowly starting to line up exactly the way I've been telling you that they have been, and that you can start to see my situation in a little bit of a different light now? It's starting to move, isn't it? Do you know why it's starting to move? Because I'm moving it. I'm moving it. I have complete control of this narrative. I'm on top of it. I'm riding it like a horse, and I'm going to take it where I want. Will I succeed? I don't know. I don't know. Am I crazy and sort of irrational because I'm thinking of it as something I can control? A little bit, in the sense that it's not technically true, like in a scientific way, right? But does it make me happy? Yeah. I only have good days. I honestly only have good days. I just don't have bad days anymore. It's like I've reframed it into my life. You know, unless I'm in physical pain or something like, you know, when I had COVID for a while, that wasn't the best day. But even when I had COVID, true story, you know, suffering along, I still had a whole bunch of good parts of my day that I, you know, was glad about. All right. Well, as the world comes my way, I just want to point out the big picture of what's happening there. Yes, I made a risk assessment. You know, this always is something worth pointing out. If somebody says, all right, I'm going to try to do something, I know there's a 20% chance it'll all go wrong for some specific reason. And then you try the thing and it goes wrong. And it goes wrong for that exact thing you said was a 20% risk. You still did the right thing. And you still knew there was a risk. So you're not like surprised or baffled why the bad thing happened. You knew it was a 20% risk. Yeah. That's the way I act all the time. All right. I have a new, let's say, opposite of the narrative take on Russia and Ukraine. So here's the headline, and see how you interpret the headline. So the headline is, apparently Russia had these really good missiles that they had used sparingly until yesterday, and then they sent 81 of these into the major cities of Ukraine. And apparently they're hard to defend against because they're launched from MiGs. So the MiGs can be, you know, anywhere when they launch them. So they're harder to defend because they're sort of close to you by the time that they launch, and they could be coming from any direction. So they're super accurate and super bad, and they got 81 of them that they could use in one day. Now, would you say that that's a sign of Russia picking up the pace and that they have plenty of weapons, because they're using their best weapons? So does this show you that they have plenty of weapons and that Russia's going to get on top of this? I don't see it that way. I think if they're using these weapons, it's all they got. And I'll bet they don't have a lot of them. Because it's their best weapons, right? The best ones, you always have fewer of them for some reason. Maybe they're more expensive, harder to make, whatever. But to me, this is looking like the signal that they're running out of weapons. But it could be a signal that they have so many weapons that they can use the good ones in a quantity way. Which way do you take it? Do you take it as a signal that they have plenty of weapons that they can use these good ones like in a mass way, or a sign that that's all they have left? I'm leaning toward they don't have many options left, so they got to use what they have, and that's what they have. All right. So whenever I talk about Ukraine and Russia, what do I always tell you? It's all guessing, because the information coming out of there is, it's war information. War information is all wrong, because nobody has an interest in reporting it correctly, right? Both sides only want to tell you what they want to tell you. They have no interest in the truth. No interest. The truth doesn't have a value in war. So you can't really believe any stories that come out of there. But, probably there were a lot of these big weapons fired. I mean, I don't know about the details, but probably there were. I still spend time on only one narrative. Yeah. So I feel like I don't need to clarify that so much, but then people keep asking, so apparently I do. I don't believe the narrative that the Ukrainians are winning. Does that help? I don't believe that narrative. But I also don't believe the narrative that Russia is winning. All right, so that gives you a better feeling about it? All right. Scott and the ammo dumps, yeah. So it's the same narrative. So let me tell you what I'm doing. I'm giving you a not preferred. I'm giving you my best, let's say, prediction and guess, but I'm also putting a low level of confidence on it. Does that work? I'm reading the tea leaves, not trusting the details, but still getting a vibe, and I'm making a prediction, but my confidence level is low. So would I be surprised if Ukraine surrendered in a week? You tell me. Would I be surprised if Ukraine just surrendered in a week? No, because that's within my worldview. My worldview is that anything could happen, and it could happen fast. Just anything. Could go either way really fast. So I'm not going to be surprised wherever it goes. I just feel a little bit of a vibe or a bias toward Russia's in more trouble than the news is reporting. That's all. But we'll find out. Yeah, I wouldn't live or die in that prediction. So if you think it's a pro-Ukraine stance, I'm not trying to. That's not my intention. But sometimes, if you don't talk about everything, it looks that way. Well, thank you, KickSync. I appreciate that. All right, I remind you that the only place you'll be able to see the Dilbert Reborn comic, this will be the post-cancellation version of Dilbert, will be on the Locals platform, as scottadams.locals.com is his subscription site. So if you do an annual subscription, it's $5 a month. And you would get the Daily Dilbert, and I'm going to make this offer. If you are a subscriber to the Locals platform, you have automatic permission to use the Dilbert comic in your presentations. Right? Don't republish it like a publisher. Don't put it in your in your newsletter every week, that kind of thing. But for one-off, if you find one and you want to use it, you have my permission. I'll put it in writing in case your corporate bosses want to see it in writing. But I'll put it in writing somewhere on the site. And if you're a subscriber, you have permission to use it in your presentations. Just don't be a publisher of it. That would be competing. Okay. Now the comic will be saucier, and I will take on topics that I would not have taken on in the newspapers. So if you're wondering how I'm feeling, you can't even understand the creative relief when I sit down to write the comic now. I enjoy writing it now. I wasn't enjoying it for a while because I was coloring between these narrow lines. And I'd be like, okay, I'm between the lines. That's okay. And now I just say, what would be funny? Just what would be funny? And then I do that. It's totally different. The experience as a creator is completely transformed into something that I'm like reborn. I actually have more enthusiasm for what's ahead than I've had in decades, literally decades. Because once you get locked into you've got to do this and you've got to do it this way, well, you're just locked into it. I have one question though for you. Should I use the F word in the second comic of the series, or would that be, because I'm not planning to do a lot of swearing, like it's not going to become profane, but I got a lot of no's. A lot of no's. All right, that's done. Yeah, the locals platform is more persuasive to me than YouTube because they literally pay a subscription fee to be with me. So I'm definitely going to listen to their opinion, more than anybody who's not on the platform. All right, I saw yeses and no's, so I'll acknowledge the yeses. But I think there were too many no's to ignore. All right, because nobody's going to want the comic because it had a bad word, but some people might not want it because it has one. So that's the calculation you do. Nobody will buy it because of it, but some will walk away from it because of it. All right, that's a decision. You see how we make decisions here? I've told you that I use this experience as like a meta brain. I sort of give it the thought, and then the collective brain of all the people watching gives me the answer. And that was exactly what I wanted. My own brain was not solving for that. So I just put it out there, and then you solved it for me. Good job. All right. I'm going to say goodbye to YouTube, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.